Jinger Duggar Vuolo has often reflected on the experiences and emotional complexities that came with her ultra-conservative upbringing. A former cast member of the Duggar family's reality shows, 19 Kids and Counting On, Jinger has recently been more open in various interviews and writings about the emotional conflicts and mental battles she faced while growing up in a highly structured and religious environment. In one of her more revealing discussions, Jinger shared that during her childhood and teenage years, she would cry when her friends chose to wear pants, something she believed was deeply wrong according to the teachings she was raised under. The rules in her household, particularly those centered around modesty and attire, were strictly enforced and deeply intertwined with her family's belief system. The emotional reaction she had to others' clothing choices wasn't a matter of preference or style, but stemmed from the strong fear that people she cared about were, in her understanding at the time, engaging in behavior that was spiritually dangerous or morally compromising. Jinger expressed that she was heartbroken because she had internalized a belief system that taught her that modesty, in the specific form of long skirts and dresses for women, was directly connected to one's standing before God. The belief that her friends were potentially straying from a righteous path by simply wearing pants left her feeling fearful, helpless, and sorrowful. According to her, this emotional conflict wasn't rooted in judgment but in fear. She felt responsible, in some way, for the spiritual well-being of those around her, and believed that she was witnessing a kind of spiritual downfall when friends departed from the modesty standards she had been taught to uphold. Over time, as Jinger entered adulthood, married Jeremy Vuolo, and moved away from her Arkansas home to Los Angeles, she began to critically examine many of the beliefs she had held since childhood. This shift didn't happen suddenly or without internal struggle. It took years of studying scripture, seeking counsel, and slowly unlearning the patterns of fear-based thinking that had shaped her worldview. She has repeatedly emphasized that her journey away from those teachings was not a rejection of her Christian faith, but a reassessment of the interpretation and applications that were instilled in her during her formative years. In her book Becoming Free Indeed, Jinger outlines in great detail how teachings promoted by Bill Gothard, the founder of the Institute in Basic Life Principles, an organization closely followed by the Duggar family, impacted her spiritual and emotional development. Gothard's teachings placed strong emphasis on outward appearance, authority, and rigid behavioral codes. According to Jinger, these rules were presented not as personal convictions, but as universal mandates that determined one's relationship with God. Jinger shared that for much of her life, she believed that disobedience to any of these principles, even something seemingly small like wearing pants or listening to certain types of music, could bring about divine punishment or spiritual failure. The intensity of those beliefs created a kind of internal prison where fear was a constant presence. When she saw others stepping outside those boundaries, whether intentionally or unknowingly, it triggered profound emotional responses. She wasn't crying because she disliked what they wore, but because she feared for their spiritual state, believing that any deviation from strict modesty could result in God's disfavor. Now, having distanced herself from those teachings, Jinger reflects on those moments with empathy for her younger self. She recognizes that she was a child trying to make sense of complex spiritual ideas that were taught with authority and without room for critical thought. In many ways, her emotional breakdowns over seemingly small issues were indicators of just how deeply those teachings had affected her. The emotional weight she carried was real, even if the reasoning behind it has since evolved. She also explains that the modesty standards weren't merely about clothing, they represented an entire framework of control and performance-based religion. The rules were often upheld as safeguards, taught to protect young women from temptation, danger, and sin. But for Jinger, and likely many others raised in similar environments, these rules also became a source of anxiety, confusion, and emotional suppression. The journey to healing and rethinking those beliefs involved not just questioning the teachings of Gothard, but also learning how to distinguish between biblical principles and man-made rules. Jinger has said that for years she conflated the two, believing that anything her parents taught her in the name of Christianity was automatically God's will. It took time to untangle those ideas and rebuild a faith that was grounded in grace rather than fear. Jinger has been clear that she does not look back on her upbringing with anger or hatred. She expresses love and respect for her parents, acknowledging that they did what they thought was right based on what they had been taught. However, she also recognizes the need to speak out about the harm that can come from rigid, fear-based religious systems. Her intent is not to tear down her family or community, but to offer a path of freedom to others who may be experiencing similar spiritual struggles. She also points out that outward appearances, such as wearing skirts instead of pants, are not what define one's relationship with God. This shift in perspective was transformative for her. It allowed her to begin forming relationships with others without constantly filtering their choices through a lens of religious judgment. She learned to see people as complex individuals, not merely as conforming or non-conforming to a set of rules. In her current life, Jinger wears pants and has adopted a more relaxed view on modesty, guided by personal conviction and biblical study rather than prescribed lists of do's and don'ts. This change has not been without criticism, particularly from some members of the conservative Christian community who see her shift as a form of rebellion or compromise. However, Jinger stands firm in her belief that modesty is a matter of the heart, not of specific clothing choices, and that her current approach to faith is more biblically sound and spiritually freeing. One of the central messages Jinger shares when recounting her past is that fear should not be the foundation of faith. She talks about how, for many years, she lived in constant worry about doing something wrong and invoking divine judgment. This mindset led to perfectionism, anxiety, and emotional exhaustion. Today, she is learning how to rest in the security of her faith and in the belief that God's love is not contingent on perfect behavior or adherence to man-made rules. By sharing her story, Jinger hopes to help others who may be wrestling with similar fears. She understands that not everyone will agree with her conclusions or changes, but she believes that open dialogue is necessary for spiritual growth. Her transparency is not meant to be divisive, but rather to spark thoughtful reflection and deeper understanding. In her interviews and writings, she continues to clarify that her critique is not aimed at all forms of modesty or at Christian parents who raise their children with strong moral values. Instead, she is calling attention to the dangers of elevating personal standards to the level of divine command and the emotional toll such systems can exact on individuals, particularly young women who are taught that their worth is tied to their appearance and submission. Jinger's voice is one among many former members of fundamentalist Christian circles who are now speaking out about the unintended consequences of rigid religious structures. Her willingness to share both her pain and her growth has resonated with readers and listeners across various backgrounds. It has also prompted important conversations about spiritual abuse, freedom in faith, and the importance of personal discernment. Through her journey, Jinger has discovered a faith that emphasizes grace, freedom, and personal responsibility rather than fear, conformity, and external appearances. Her story is a testament to the resilience of those who seek truth, even when it requires reevaluating everything they once believed to be sacred. While she still holds to her Christian beliefs, her expression of those beliefs now reflects a maturity and compassion that can only come through deep personal reflection and spiritual awakening. In remembering the times she cried over friends wearing pants, Jinger does not mock or minimize those feelings. Instead, she honors them as part of her story, evidence of a young girl's sincere desire to please God, even when misled. Her journey serves as a reminder that spiritual growth often involves unlearning, relearning, and finding peace in a more accurate understanding of faith. By speaking publicly about these experiences, Jinger continues to offer support and validation to those who may be navigating similar transitions. Her message is one of hope, healing, and the ongoing pursuit of a faith that is based on love and truth, rather than fear and control. She invites others to explore their beliefs honestly, to ask difficult questions, and to seek a relationship with God that is marked by freedom rather than bondage. As Jinger Duggar Vuolo continues to share her life through books, interviews, and social media, she remains committed to telling the truth about her past while embracing a future shaped by clarity, grace, and personal conviction. Her story is still unfolding, but what remains clear is her desire to live authentically, guided not by fear of judgment, but by a deeper understanding of what it means to live a life of faith. Former Counting On star Jed Duggar says some of his siblings regret having kids immediately after marriage, reveals he and wife Maddie are waiting to start a family. Jed Duggar, one of the younger members of the Duggar family and a former star on Counting On, has recently opened up about his views on parenthood and shared that he and his wife Maddie are not rushing to start a family. In a rare and candid statement, Jason also mentioned that some of his siblings have expressed regret over having children immediately after marriage. His comments provide a different perspective from the traditional Duggar family values, which have long emphasized large families and early parenthood. Jason, now in his mid-20s, quietly married Maddie in a low-key ceremony several months ago. Since then, the couple has maintained a relatively private life, especially compared to some of Jason's more high-profile siblings. While they still uphold some core beliefs of the Duggar family, Jason and Maddie appear to be charting their own course, especially when it comes to starting a family. In a recent interview, Jason stated that although children are a blessing, not every couple needs to start having kids immediately after marriage. He explained that he and Maddie have chosen to wait and focus on building their relationship, establishing their home life, and pursuing some personal goals before bringing children into the picture. This approach marks a noticeable shift from what the public typically associates with the Duggar family. Over the years, many of Jason's siblings married young and began expanding their families soon afterward. Several of them now have large families of their own, in line with their parents Bob and Michelle Duggar's beliefs about quiverfull parenting and letting God determine the size of a family. However, Jason shared that in private conversations, a few of his siblings have admitted that they wished they had taken more time before jumping into parenthood. According to Jason, the pressures of immediate parenting, financial instability, and a lack of experience in managing a home have led some of his siblings to reflect on whether their timing was ideal. These statements, though not naming any specific siblings, offer a rare glimpse into private family sentiments that contrast with their public image. Jason did not criticize his siblings for their decisions, but rather emphasized the importance of making informed and thoughtful choices in life, especially when it comes to marriage and children. He believes that each couple should be free to decide what is best for them, rather than adhering to expectations set by family traditions or public perceptions. His wife Maddie shares similar views. In a brief joint statement, she added that while she looks forward to becoming a mother one day, she feels no urgency. Instead, she is focused on supporting Jason in his work, enjoying their marriage, and making sure they are both emotionally and financially prepared for parenthood when the time comes. Jason's remarks come at a time when several members of the Duggar family have begun reevaluating the teachings they were raised with. In recent years, Jed Duggar Dillard and Jinger Duggar Vuolo have publicly distanced themselves from some of the more extreme teachings of the Institute in Basic Life Principles, the organization their parents supported. Jason's comments, while less confrontational, suggest that even the younger generation of Duggars may be moving toward more moderate or individualized life choices. Public reaction to Jason's comments has been mixed. Some longtime fans of the Duggar family praised his maturity and thoughtful approach to marriage and parenting. Others expressed surprise, noting that Jason's statement deviates from the narrative the Duggar family typically promoted on 19 kids and counting, and later counting on. However, a growing number of observers feel that Jason's views reflect a broader cultural shift among younger evangelicals, many of whom are reassessing traditional roles and expectations. Family planning has always been a central topic in Duggar family discussions. Jim Bob and Michelle Duggar famously had 19 children and advocated for a large family lifestyle rooted in their religious convictions. For decades, this belief shaped the lives of their children, most of whom followed in their footsteps. However, with changing times and new experiences, the next generation of Duggars seems increasingly open to redefining what family life looks like. Some of Jason's siblings have already started sharing their evolving views. Jill Duggar has spoken openly about using birth control, and Jinger has written about her spiritual journey in her book, which questions many of the rigid teachings she grew up with. Jason's more subtle approach adds to the growing list of Duggar children taking alternative paths in their adult lives. Despite the changes, Jason maintains a close relationship with his family. He described his parents as loving and supportive, even if their views occasionally differ. He also stated that while he appreciates his upbringing, he and Maddie intend to make decisions that reflect their unique goals and values as a couple. Jason's announcement that he and Maddie are waiting to have children does not mean they are rejecting their faith or family values altogether. Instead, it appears they are choosing to apply those values in a more personal and measured way. Jason emphasized that patience and preparation are crucial elements for a successful marriage and for raising children responsibly. The couple has not set a timeline for when they plan to start a family. For now, they are focused on their relationship, exploring shared interests, and building a stable foundation. Jason is currently involved in several business projects and community work, while Maddie is said to be pursuing education and volunteer opportunities. Their approach reflects a desire to grow individually and as a couple before taking on the responsibilities of parenting. As more Duggar siblings begin to speak out about their experiences and choices, it becomes clear that the narrative surrounding the Duggar family is changing. No longer limited to the image of a unified, ultra-conservative household, the younger Duggars are showing that personal agency and thoughtful decision-making are becoming more prominent in their lives. Whether or not Jason and Maddie eventually choose to have a large family, their current approach sets them apart from many of their siblings. Their openness about waiting to have children and the acknowledgement that some family members have had regrets demonstrates a significant cultural shift within the once tightly structured Duggar family ideology. Ultimately, Jason's recent comments reflect a broader message that couples should feel empowered to make decisions that best fit their lives, without pressure from tradition, community expectations, or public image. It remains to be seen how other Duggar family members will respond, but Jason and Maddie's stance is likely to influence how younger fans, and possibly even some siblings, view marriage and parenting moving forward. As the Duggar family continues to evolve, Jason's comments stand as a quiet but meaningful moment in the family's ongoing story. By speaking honestly about personal choices and acknowledging the complex realities of family life, Jason is contributing to a more nuanced understanding of what it means to grow up in one of reality TV's most famous families.